Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. I'm your host, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take. 32 picks, 32 days. We did 1 through 10, as I should say. I did 1 through 10, leaving off with the Buffalo Bills. If you have not checked that out, Bills fans, Bills Mafia, Bills Fanatics, check that out. I gave my prediction for who I think will go 10th overall to the Buffalo Bills. And no, the decision that the Buffalo Bills made to keep Tyrod Taylor does not impact my pick at 10th overall. It actually helps it. So, that being said, on to the next one. The New Orleans Saints pick 11th overall. A disappointing season, to say the least, as it seemed as if the New Orleans Saints were a shootout-type team, going tit for tat, drive for drive with other teams, some of the best teams in the NFL, and their defense really lacked in 2016. One of the worst defenses in the National Football League, and there is a huge need to add to that side of the ball. First, I like to talk about what I like about the Saints moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot to like about the quarterback. Drew Brees, how many years does he have left? Probably not too many. Brees says he has 3 or 4 years. I see 3 years being the case. 4 if he wants to stretch it out a little bit more. But, where do I start with Drew Brees? A story that is one of the most remarkable stories of this generation of players within the last 15 years. A guy that was a second-round pick, the first pick in the second round back in 2001 out of Purdue, played behind a veteran like Doug Flutie for a couple years, then took over as the face of the franchise for the Chargers back when they had, LT LaDainian Tomlinson in his prime. And Drew Brees was known as a good passer, but, had that running back to lean on in LaDainian Tomlinson. And now, moving forward, he tears his shoulder, gets his throwing shoulder all messed up, and is written off completely, so much that the Chargers felt that they needed to go in another direction, and they went with Phillip Rivers. Actually, they went with Eli Manning, picking first overall. They went with Eli Manning, traded Eli to the Giants in exchange for their current quarterback in Los Angeles now, as I should say, Phillip Rivers, who's been there for quite some time. He's been there ever since. Drew Brees moves on. He's got a choice between the Miami Dolphins and the New Orleans Saints. Goes to Miami, does the Miami City Tour, the South Beach Tour with Nick Saban. But then he's brought to New Orleans, where it had just been ravaged by Hurricane Katrina. And Peyton brings him around. Sean Payton brings him around, makes him the focal point of the team, paints a picture of him being the savior of not just the franchise, but the city. And it was a rags to riches story for not just the Saints, but it was a rags to riches story for Drew Brees. As in 4 years' time, they were hoisting, maybe not 4 years' time, a few years later, they were hosting the Lombardi Trophy. So it was a remarkable feat for Drew Brees to go from really zero to hero in a matter of a few years. And, now the nucleus of those teams that made their teams what they were, the fact that they were a complete team defensively and offensively, now that's not so much the case. There's talk about them treating Brandon Cooks. He's on the last year of his rookie contract. Things are trending in the way that he will be moved. They've been working hard to try and get a return for him when he was their first-round pick no more than a few years back. So disappointing that they can't get an extension. They can't reach an extension with Brandon Cooks on a long-term deal. I'd like to see him stay on the Saints. I'd like to see him work with Drew Brees for a few more years, for the few years that Drew Brees has left. But that might not be the case. The case might be he might be sent packing, and Drew Brees will have to work with what is given to him. This would be the second time, though, in as many as 3 years that the Saints have sent some of the best weapons at Drew Brees' disposal packing. You got Jimmy Graham, and then you have Brandon Cooks, but they replaced him with Kobe Fleener. He did okay, not great, not Jimmy Graham by any means. But then you look at who they have on the roster currently to replace Brandon Cooks. Michael Thomas filled in very well as a rookie last year. He had a fantastic rookie year. He's kind of taken over that Marquise Colston role. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. But as I alluded to in the beginning of the show, the Saints have a dire need for some sort of a pass rushing type player or a secondary type player, whether it's a safety or a corner. They have needs all across the board. And one guy that comes to mind that's available on my board at 11th overall is Tennessee Volunteer Derek Barnett, the defensive end for the Tennessee Vols. He was the first true freshman defensive lineman to start the season opener in Tennessee Vols history. Overall, he played in 13 games, made 10 starts, finished the season with school true freshman records of 10 sacks and 20.5 tackles for loss. Both Barnett and the top overall pick, spoiler alert, in the 2017 draft, Myles Jarrett, broke Jadeveon Clowney's SEC freshman sack record, which had previously been 8. On December 30th, 2016, in the 2016 Music City Bowl, Barnett broke the University of Tennessee's career sack record of 32, which was formerly held by none other than Reggie White, who is regarded as the best defensive end of all time, arguably the best defensive end of all time. You have Barnett in 2014, 2015, 2016 playing in 3 games, foregoing his senior season at an all-time high. His stock is on an all-time high. 73 tackles, 69 tackles, 56 tackles. Tackles for loss, 20.5, 12.5, 19. Sacks went up each year. 9 his freshman year, 10 his sophomore year, 13 his junior year. He also had an interception and 2 forced fumbles in his junior season. So Barnett is a guy that is a part of a crop of talented pass rushers. You have, as I mentioned, Myles Jarrett. You have Jonathan Allen, who I'll get to him a little bit later on another day. You also have Solomon Thomas, to name a few. Barnett is one of those guys that is in that conversation, and deservedly so. I think he would fill a huge need for the New Orleans Saints, not just in the immediate future, but beyond post-Drew Brees. He would be a defensive cornerstone type guy that the Saints could lean on, that the Saints haven't really had in quite some time. He measures at 6'3", 259. As far as the conference that he played in, the defensive talent that was in the Southeastern Conference makes it really difficult to say who is the best. He's one of the best. As far as acumen and smarts, every year that he was at Tennessee, he made the honor roll. He was the first freshman ever, again, to start on the line for Tennessee in 2014. His 20.5 sacks for loss led the SEC, and he had 10 sacks on the year. That immediate production at the college level exudes confidence in myself that Barnett will make immediate impact on the pro level. He's got the NFL build, 6'3", 260. He's a guy that I think would fit well in a 3-4 or 4-3 scheme as a blitzing linebacker. It'll be very interesting to see what he would bring to the table. He has real true strength as far as power. He's a powerful defensive end. Hands are strong, fast, efficient. He has a 1-2 punch at the line with his body and then with his hands. And that's a guy that I would really like on my team if I were looking for a defensive end here 11th for the New Orleans Saints. He has elite production year after year that was on par with Reggie White against the run and as a sack artist. So he can do it against the run. He can do it against the pass. Getting after the quarterback, he can get after the ball carrier. The one weakness I would say is, even though he had successful seasons, he wasn't really putting up big numbers to start the season. There's times where he's a smart player. He could maybe even overthink things as a player. And as far as building this team for the long haul, you need to have that guy that you can put in any defensive scheme as a D lineman. And Barnett fits the mold perfectly. You look at who they have in the division, as I have with every 32 Picks Thomas Take Sports podcast segment. You got the Panthers with one of the rarest talents at the quarterback position in Cam Newton, a real rare talent. You have Matt Ryan, who turned in an MVP season last year, MVP Most Valuable Player for 2016. And then you have Jameis Winston, who's looking to make an impact year in and year out as one of the young guns of the NFL. So you need a guy that can go after these three guys, put them in the ground, and I think Derek Barnett is it. As I said, one of the better pass rushers in this year's draft, and that says a lot because he's a guy that fits the mold of the elite. You know, there's a lot of elite guys in this draft. You know, Jarrett, one of them. Jonathan Allen is another one, but he's got that shoulder injury. And Solomon Thomas, everybody knows that I'm really high on. I like Barnett here. He's a defensive cornerstone type player for Sean Payton for many years to come. And post Drew Brees, you at least know that you have a stud on the defensive line that can get after the quarterback and a guy that can get after the ball carrier. So Tennessee Vols defensive end Derek Barnett going 11th overall to the New Orleans Saints. Very excited to see what happens at 11th overall. That is the direction that I think they will go in. That does not mean that is the direction that they will go in. So keep in mind this is an NFL mock draft. And you got to think long term. Could they look to get a receiver there if they do decide to send Brandon Cooks packing? Do they invest another first-round pick in a receiver? They might need to at that position if they send Brandon Cooks packing. But I would build up that defense. Their defense was one of the worst in the league last year. That is where I would start. That was part one of the Thomas Take Sports podcast, as I predict Derek Barnett will go to the New Orleans Saints. We have a lot of episodes coming up. Next is the second first-round draft choice of the Cleveland Browns, 12th overall. What direction will the Browns go in after selecting Myles Jarrett first overall from Texas A&M? Will they stay on the defensive side of the ball, or will they move to the offensive side of the ball? I'll give you my take coming up next.